They said only a fool would touch that ranch, a rotting house on the ridge sold for 3 cents, cursed by silence and fire. But a poor cowboy laid down his last coins and signed the deed anyway. He thought he was buying emptiness. What he found instead was a black Mustang waiting in the shadows of a broken stall, and secrets buried so deep they could ruin or redeem an entire town. Because Black Hollow Ranch was never just abandoned land. It was a test. And the man who dared to claim it was about to learn why no one else ever came back. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe. The mountains of Silver Ridge stood like tired giants, their slopes streaked in pale rock, and their peaks already powdered with the first snow of early winter. Wind came down the passes in dry gusts, scouring the ridges, carrying with it the brittle scent of stone and old pine sap. Along the switchback road that climbed toward the higher valleys, dust lifted in brief whirls before vanishing into the gray air. The trail itself was narrow-scarred with ruts from wagons long gone, and so seldom traveled now that weeds pushed up between the stones. It was the kind of country that felt abandoned, where silence carried weight, and every echo of hoof or step seemed to belong to another time. On that lonely track moved a single rider on foot, guiding no horse, but carrying the remnants of a life once spent in the saddle. Jesse Hart came slow, shoulders squared against the wind, his body lean under a patched coat. Each step betrayed a faint stiffness in his right leg, the mark of an accident years earlier when a half-broke Mustang had thrown him hard onto stone. He walked with the patience of a man used to distance the rhythm of survival rather than hurry. His face was sun-browned and lined deep around the mouth stubble covering his jaw. Dark eyes, tired but alert, scanned the ridges as though expecting trouble even in this emptiness. He looked like a cowboy, stripped of everything but bone and grit, the kind of man the frontier often swallowed whole without memory. He had not always drifted. Once long ago, Jesse had thought the West might give him a place. He had chased cattle across open range, swung a pick in mines that stank of sweat and gunpowder, hauled crates for merchants who barely paid him in coin or bread. Every time he was left behind when the job dried up or someone else needed the wages more. He had no family to vouch for him, no friends with influence. In campfires and bunkhouses, he had been tolerated, but never kept. He moved from town to town like tumbleweed, present one day, forgotten the next. The road had stripped him down to little more than what he carried now, an old saddle worn slick at the edges, slung across his back like a relic. A thin blanket rolled under one arm. A hunting knife rust already claiming the edge. And in his coat pocket a few coins that clinked when he shifted, worth no more than a crust of bread. Folded between the pages of nothing else lay a small photograph, its corners bent, the image nearly rubbed away. His parents long dead, their faces blurred by years and weather. That picture was less proof of blood than of memory, and he kept it out of stubbornness more than sentiment. As the ridge trail rose, Jesse paused to catch his breath. He leaned against a boulder, looking out at the valley falling away behind him, a quilt of dead grass and leafless cottonwoods. His chest lifted slow and steady, the kind of measured breath soldiers take when they refuse to show weakness. In truth, he was not thinking of the view. He was thinking of the emptiness inside, of how many years had gone by without a place to belong, of how even the last coins in his pocket, 3 small cents, felt less like currency and more like a sentence. 3 cents, the final tally of a man who had given everything to the West and received nothing but scars in return. He smiled without humor, a dry twist of the mouth. 3 cents left, he muttered, voice low in the wind. That's about what I'm worth to the world. His words scattered with the dust, no one to hear them but the circling crows above. Yet even in that bitterness, there was something else, something quieter. Jesse Hart had no plan, no mapped-out destiny. He did not expect fortune to greet him in Silver Ridge, nor companionship, nor a roof more permanent than a stable loft. All he wanted was a place to stop moving. A place, even if half ruined, where silence might be his alone. He felt like a shadow walking across the face of the West, barely noticed, half erased by time, but still stubbornly moving forward. Morning came to Silver Ridge, under a veil of thin fog. It clung to the eaves of wooden roofs, softened the edges of the clapboard storefronts, and turned the church bell into a tired, hollow echo that rolled across the nearly empty streets. A pair of women hauled buckets from the well, their boots tapping over boards warped by time. A boy hurried past with kindling strapped to his back. Aside from them, the town still slept. Jesse Hart walked with his hat low and his coat pulled tight. He carried the same saddle he had hauled for miles, his boots scuffing dust that turned gray in the early light. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was looking for a sign of work, or at least a roof that wasn't falling down. His eyes scanned the windows. He passed the saloon closed tight and the mercantile shuttered, the blacksmith shop quiet. Then he caught sight of a faded board hanging crooked over a small office tucked against the street. The letters were chipped almost beyond reading, but still legible. Graves encumber real estate. He paused, lips curling in the faintest suggestion of a smile. Real estate. He had less than a handful of coins left in his pocket, but something pulled him to that door all the same. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the stubbornness that had carried him this far. The office was a squat wooden structure, its windows gray with dust. One pane bore a crack held together by a strip of resin. The sign above the door swayed slightly with the morning breeze. Jesse pushed the door open, and the hinges gave a groan that sounded as weary as the town itself. Inside, the air was close and dry, with a faint ghost of old tobacco clinging to it. A desk sat near the center, warped and split with age papers piled high in teetering stacks. A chair squeaked in protest under the weight of a man thin as kindling hair, white and combed straight back. His hands moved slowly, turning over a folder as if the motion had been repeated 1,000 times. His face was long, with lines carved deep around the mouth, and eyes the map of a man who had watched too many others come and go. Martin Graves. The name was nailed in brass above the doorway, but Jesse didn't need it. One look told him this was a man who had lived his entire life behind that desk, watching land change hands, watching dreams sold cheap. Martin raised his head when the door closed behind Jesse. His eyes were sharp, though dulled at the edges by fatigue. "You looking for land?" he asked. Voice gravelly, or just trying to get out of the cold? Jesse smirked faintly, tugging at the brim of his hat. "Depends on what you've got. If it's cheap enough, I might listen. I don't have much." Martin studied him a long moment, then leaned down and opened a drawer. He sifted through folders yellowed and fraying until he pulled one free. The cover was soft and bent at the corners, its title scrawled in faded ink. He slid it across the desk with deliberate slowness. "Black Hollow Ranch," the old man said. 120 acres. Jesse picked it up, thumbed through the sparse pages. A rough sketch map. A few notes on location: the ranch perched on the mountainside with a sagging house, a barn, a stretch of pasture gone to weeds. At the bottom of the last page was the asking price. His brow furrowed. 3 cents, he said, incredulous. That's not even the tax on a cup of coffee. Martin's mouth twitched somewhere between a smile and a grimace. 3 cents. That's all. The owner wants it gone. Doesn't care who takes it. Jesse tapped the paper with a finger. Why? The old man drew out a pipe, lit it with practiced slowness, and let the first curl of smoke drift into the stale air. His eyes narrowed as if measuring whether the cowboy standing before him was the kind to laugh or the kind to listen. That ranch, Martin said, slowly belonged to a young woman, Elena Cruz. She kept it running even when no one thought she could. She raised a horse there, a black Mustang, from a foal. Folks say it grew into a beast bigger than any man should ever ride. Then Elena took sick, coughed herself to the grave before her time. He paused, drew on the pipe. The smoke hung low between them. After that, no one would touch Black Hollow. They say it's cursed. At night, light still burns in the house, though no hand strikes a match. Hoofbeats echo from the barn, though no rider saddles up. A few greedy fools tried to claim it. Every one of them came running back down the mountain, swearing they saw a black shadow moving in the yard. Martin shrugged as if to dismiss it, but his eyes stayed locked on Jesse's. Believe it or don't, makes no difference. All I know is no one's willing to live there. 3 cents, and even then, I can't find a buyer. Jesse was silent, his fingers drumming lightly on the desk. Ghost stories. Every stretch of land in the West had them. They kept children inside at night, made cowhands drink faster, gave gamblers something to laugh at. But in his experience, most so-called curses had simpler explanations. And even if Black Hollow Ranch truly carried shadows, he had nothing left to lose. He looked up, his expression steady. 3 cents won't even buy a cup of coffee in this town. I'll take it. Martin blinked. You're serious? Jesse nodded once. Dead serious. The old man sighed, reached into a drawer and drew out a certificate written in faded ink. He scribbled Jesse's name across it, slid it across the desk. Jesse reached into his coat, pulled 3 coins from his pocket, and dropped them onto the wood. The sound was bright in the quiet room, a metallic chime that seemed to echo. Martin looked at the coins, then at Jesse. His shoulders sank a fraction, and he shook his head. You'll need more than courage, son. But sometimes courage is the only coin that counts. He stamped the paper and pushed it across. Jesse folded it, tucked it into his coat. He didn't thank the man, didn't waste a word. As he turned for the door, Martin's voice stopped him. If you ride up there, don't expect a welcome. Black Hollow has swallowed men stronger than you. Jesse glanced over his shoulder. His eyes were hard, steady as stone. I've crossed deserts with nothing but dust in my mouth. I've laid in fields where buffaloes stampeded over the wounded. If that ranch has ghosts, I'll live beside them. Martin barked a dry laugh, one without humor. God help you, boy. You'll need it. Jesse left Silver Ridge at noon with little more than a folded deed in his pocket, a pouch of dry bread slung at his hip, and the old hunting knife strapped to his belt. The road north twisted away from the town, like a scar climbing into hills where gray clouds dragged low over the ridges. Pines lined the slopes, their needles whispering in the wind, and every gust brought a bite of cold. He walked steadily, his saddle still riding his shoulder boots, striking dust that puffed and settled again in silence. Now and then, he stopped leaning on a rock, looking up at the trail that vanished into the mountains. 3 cents, he muttered under his breath. And this is where it brings me. The further he went, the emptier the land became. No wagons, no cattle, no distant shouts of men working a line. Only wind sweeping through the timber, rattling cones loose and driving the crows from branch to branch. Hours passed without a voice, without another soul. The path that led to Black Hollow was hardly a road at all. Grass grew thick, knee-high, covering stones that had once been carved into a wagon track. Fallen rocks blocked half the way, forcing Jesse to climb or skirt around them. Where the wagon wheels had once cut grooves, only faint shadows remained. He moved carefully, his hand gripping the saddle horn, as though the leather itself might anchor him in this solitude. Above, a hawk circled its cry, sharp against the sky. It wheeled over the ridge, banking once, twice, as if marking his progress. Jesse squinted into the light and kept on, jaw tight. By the time the sun leaned west, the ranch appeared through thinning trees. He stopped where the ground opened into a slope of scrub grass and broken fence posts, staring across the hollow at what 3 cents had bought him. The house tilted on its foundation boards, silvered to ash by weather roof sagging in 2 places where shingles had long since given way. The front porch bowed under its own weight, nails rusted red. Railing slumped. Beside it stood the barn, or what remained. Beams cracked and lean doors hanging useless on their hinges. A gust sent one of them swinging, the sound sharp as a shot in the silence. The land itself looked dead. Patches of grass burned brown soil, showing through like exposed bone. Where a fence had once traced the boundary, only fragments of rotted wood jutted at odd angles, pointing nowhere. It was less a ranch than the husk of one, a carcass left to the wind. Jesse stood a long moment staring. His breath came out slow, a plume of white in the cooling air. It felt like looking at the ruins of someone's life, stripped bare and left to rot. Wind whistled through the siding, producing a low moan that seemed almost human. A shattered window clattered against its frame. Somewhere in that breath of air came another scent, faint but unmistakable. Ash, not the dry, stale dust of a fire, long gone, but fresher, sharp on the tongue. Jesse frowned. He crossed the yard carefully, boots sinking into soil gone soft from neglect. At the porch, he paused, listening. Nothing but the wind. He set his weight on the first board. It groaned like an old man. Another step and another creak until he stood before the front door. The frame leaned crooked, the door itself half unhinged. He pressed with his palm, and it swung open, shrieking on its rusted pins. Inside, the air was cold and dusty, but not dead. The main room lay shadowed furniture gray beneath a film of neglect. Yet the fireplace still held a mound of ash, faintly acrid, faintly warm. Jesse crouched, touched it with 2 fingers. It smeared against his skin. His eyes narrowed. On the table stood a glass, water dried in streaks around its rim. A bottle lay shattered near the hearth, its pieces glittering faintly. This was no house long deserted. Someone had been here days ago, maybe hours. Jesse slid the knife from his belt to the worn leather grip, rough in his palm. He moved slow, each step deliberate on floorboards that groaned beneath him. His gaze swept corners, shadows, alcoves. The kitchen told the same story. A sink eaten with rust. Shelves bare but for a few overturned jars. Plates cracked, one lying in pieces against the wall. Yet in the far corner, a blanket lay, rolled, frayed edges, crusted with dirt, as if someone had slept there and left in a hurry. Above the roof sagged rainwater, having bled dark veins across the ceiling. The bedroom gave less comfort. A bed collapsed, mattress ripped open, stuffing spilling like entrails. A chair broken, its legs splintered. Dust heavy over everything. But in that dust were tracks, a smear, a shift. Someone had passed through not so long ago. Jesse's throat felt dry. A line of sweat trickled cold beneath his shirt. The ranch was not what he expected, not merely abandoned, but unsettled. It felt like a trap half sprung, a place between the living and the dead. He lowered his knife, slightly stood in the center of the ruined house, listening to the wind rattle through the beams. His jaw tightened. 3 cents for this, he whispered. And I paid it. For a heartbeat, doubt clawed at him. He could walk away. No one would blame him. No one expected a drifter with nothing to stake his life on cursed land. But then he thought of the deed in his pocket, of the weight of those 3 coins on the table in Martin Graves's office. He thought of how far he had walked and how little remained for him elsewhere. He slid the knife back into its sheath, shoulders stiff. "You bought it, Hart. Now you live with it." The wind carried his words into the rafters. Somewhere deep in the hollow, a sound answered, faint metallic, like iron striking wood. Jesse froze, listening. Silence followed. He clenched his fists and steadied his breath. Jesse's eyes kept drifting toward the barn that leaned like a broken rib against the slope of the hollow. It pulled at him with a weight he couldn't explain, the way a soldier feels the unseen presence beyond the ridgeline. The barn door hung crooked, half open, swaying on its rusted hinge. The wind pushed through the gap, whistling in thin tones that sounded disturbingly like breath drawn in and released. Jesse lifted the small oil lantern he'd lit from the hearth and made his way across the yard. Each step sank into soil packed with years of fallen straw and rain. When he reached the threshold, the scent changed. It was not just the sour reek of old hay and rotting timbers. There was another smell, faint but alive, the musky tang of horsehair, of sweat, of something warm that did not belong to the ruins of an abandoned ranch. He raised the lantern higher and stepped inside. The boards groaned under his boots. Dust shifted and fell from the rafters. Light spread in an uneven circle across collapsed stalls and broken beams. Cobwebs shimmered in the glow threads, trembling with each stir of air. The barn was half dead, and yet not empty. The silence shattered with a sudden crack of impact. A hoof struck wood somewhere in the dark. The sound boomed through the barn, rattling the rafters, shaking grit loose from the ceiling. Jesse stiffened. His hand closed around the knife at his belt, knuckles white. He lifted the lantern higher. The darkness answered with a deep, rolling snort. Breath gusted, heavy and hot, echoing off the walls. The air seemed to thicken with it, as though the barn itself inhaled. Jesse's pulse hammered. This wasn't imagination. Something large was in here with him. From the farthest stall, movement stirred. A shape began to peel itself from shadow, larger with each step it took toward the light. First, the gleam of an eye, bright and golden, catching the lantern flame. Then the outline of a head, broad and scarred, framed by a mane long and wild. A body followed, huge and coiled with muscle, under a coat blacker than pitch. Dust clung to its flanks, but the power beneath was unmistakable. The Mustang was no ghost, no whisper of rumor. It was real, and it was magnificent. Jesse froze, breath caught in his throat. He had seen wild horses before on the plains, lean and swift, vanishing at the first sight of man. But this one did not run. It came forward with deliberate weight, hooves striking the ground with the rhythm of a drumbeat. Its head was high, ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring. It did not shy. It did not yield. The animal stopped squarely between Jesse and the open doorway. Lantern light traced the rippling lines of its chest, the scars etched into its hide, the tangled mane that spilled down its neck. It stood like a sentinel, blocking escape, owning the ground. Jesse's chest tightened, but he held his ground. To step back now would be to admit trespass, to tell the Mustang he was unworthy. He planted his boots, shoulders squared, eyes locked on the great black shape. The horse exhaled hard, vapor curling white into the cold air. Another stomp of the hoof, louder, closer, spraying dust that swirled around Jesse's boots. The barn shook with the force. Every muscle in Jesse's body urged him to retreat, but he knew what retreat would mean. So he stood. His heart raced, pounding like war drums in his ears, but he did not flinch. In the glow of the lantern, the Mustang's eyes burned, fierce, defiant, and yet something more. Jesse had spent years among men who told lies with their mouths while their eyes betrayed the truth. He knew how to read the look of hunger, of hate, of fear. What he saw now was none of those. The beast's gaze was heavy with something else. It was challenge, yes, but also waiting. Jesse drew a slow breath. Wild horses did not linger near men. They fled tails high, gone before you could raise a rope. This one had stayed. More than stayed, it confronted him. That meant it had reason. If you're still here, Jesse thought, then you're waiting for someone. He lowered the lantern slightly, shifting its light away from the horse's eyes, softening the moment. His voice came out low, rough with dust and fatigue, but steady. If you're still here, he murmured, then you're waiting for someone. The Mustang tossed its head mane, scattering dust, a sharp snort tearing from its lungs. But it did not charge. It did not flee. Its ears twitched toward him, catching his words. Jesse crouched a little, careful not to advance, simply holding the space between them. He studied what the lantern revealed. The thick mane was knotted, but not filthy. Faint impressions on the neck told of tack long since broken away. Across one flank ran a scar, pale against black hide, the mark of some old battle or accident. The animal bore the signs of care once given, of bonds once forged. This was no creature wholly wild. It had known people, and yet it had chosen to stay behind. The Mustang lifted its head, drawing in the air as though to test his scent. It took a step forward. The earth trembled faintly beneath the impact of its hoof. Its eyes never left him. Jesse did not move. His knife stayed in his belt, his hands visible. His only weapon now was patience. He let the silence stretch until it ached. He could feel sweat cool against his temple, his throat dry as sand. At last the horse shook its mane, gave a long, throaty breath, and lowered its head by a fraction. Not surrender, not trust, but not hostility either. Jesse's chest eased. He exhaled slow, nearly a laugh, though no humor touched it. So you don't count me as an enemy? Not yet. His voice was quiet words, meant for the animal alone. You're a shadow. But maybe your hope too. The Mustang blinked lashes heavy, then shifted its weight back. The moment of tension bled into stillness. Jesse straightened slowly, lantern held low. He did not reach, did not push further. The connection had been made in silence, and silence would keep it. He turned at last and walked back toward the doorway. Behind him, hooves scuffed the earth, but no pursuit followed. The horse stayed where it stood, massive and unyielding, yet it did not drive him out. Jesse stepped into the night air, the cold biting sharper than before. He glanced back once. Through the cracked boards of the barn, he could see the shape still there, tall and black against the shadows. He left the barn door open. If the beast wanted to leave, it would. But as Jesse crossed to the house and struck fire in the hearth, he heard it still pacing, stamping, watching. The night passed with that rhythm in his ears, the steady thud of hooves, the sentinel's march. On the old settee knife across his chest, Jesse stretched and closed his eyes. Tomorrow, he whispered to no one, I'll know who you are. Through the window, firelight flickered across the barn. The silhouette of the black Mustang stood framed in its ruined mane-tangled body, vast and immovable. Jesse saw it once more before sleep claimed him. The name came unbidden, silent on his lips. Shadow. He did not speak it aloud, but it carved itself into his mind as certain as the cold wind that swept through Black Hollow. Morning broke pale over the hollow, and the sky a dim wash of gray. Mist clung to the grass like a shroud. and the fences scattered across the slope rose only half visible, their rotted posts, like bones pushing through fog. Jesse stirred from his uneasy rest, his back sore from the warped settee. For a moment, he thought the pounding he heard was only his own heartbeat. Then it came again, measured steady. He sat up. Outside in the half-light, the sound of hooves pressed against the earth. He stepped onto the porch boots, creaking against damp boards. There in the mist, a dark mass, shifted shadow, pacing slow, each stomp of his hoof sending a thrum into the cold ground. The stallion stood half-shrouded black against white fog, as if cut from the night itself and stranded here with the dawn. Jesse lifted the tin cup he'd filled with cold water from the pump, drank deep, and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. His eyes stayed fixed on the Mustang, wary, drawn uneasy, and yet strangely steadied by its presence. Then another sound came, fainter, lighter. Not hooves. Footsteps on the mountain trail that led up from Silver Ridge. Jesse straightened eyes, narrowing. His hand slipped toward the knife at his belt. Whoever came this way had a reason, and reasons were dangerous. Out of the fog walked a woman, thin, upright, despite her years carrying a woven basket in the crook of one arm. Her hair, once dark, had faded to iron gray, tied back with a strip of cloth. Her coat was patched but clean, and her boots struck the stones with the confidence of someone who had walked this path many times. The basket was covered with a square of cloth, but the smell drifted out regardless: cornbread, warm and sweet, and the sharper, bitter comfort of coffee. Jesse's hand relaxed from the knife. His shoulders eased as she drew close enough for him to see her eyes clear, lined with age, but gentle. "Morning," she said, voice steady, carrying in the quiet air. "I'm Martha Doyle. My place is on the Eastern Ridge. From my porch, I can see this ranch clear as day." Jesse dipped his chin, wary but polite. "Hart," he said simply. "Jesse Hart." She nodded once, then crossed the yard without asking, and set the basket down on the porch table. Steam rose faintly as she pulled back the cloth. "Baked this morning, cornbread still warm, and coffee too. Land's cold up here, you'll need a proper breakfast if you mean to stay." The words caught him off guard. It had been years since anyone had brought him anything, years since kindness arrived unasked for. He looked down at the food, then back at her, uneasy in the way men are when they've forgotten how to accept generosity. Thank you," he managed. "Guess I owe you one." Martha only smiled, faint and patient. "You don't owe me anything. Just seemed wrong, someone moving into this place and not being welcomed with a bite to eat." Jesse sat breaking a piece of bread, chewing slowly, grateful for the warmth filling his stomach. He studied her from under the brim of his hat. She wasn't just here to feed him. There was a weight in her eyes, something she meant to share. She turned, gazing out over the ranch. Her mouth tightened, her eyes softened with memory. "This was Elena Cruz's land," she said at last. She was the only one who could keep that black horse under a rope. At the name, Jesse lifted his head. He said nothing, waiting. "Elena found him as a foal," Martha went on. "Alone on the mountainside, half-starved, legs too weak to carry him. She carried milk to him by hand, fed him till he stood strong. She gave him shelter, patience, time. That Mustang grew, and she never broke him, never tried to. They were partners, friends more than horse and owner." Jesse let the bread rest in his hand. His eyes drifted toward the fog, where shadows still stood silent, as if listening too. Martha's voice dropped lower now. "Elena died sudden. They said it was her lungs. One night she coughed blood, and by morning she was gone." Jesse's brow furrowed. There was something too simple in that telling, too neat. He had lived long enough to know sudden death rarely came without shadows trailing it. After the funeral, Martha continued no one stayed. The ranch was left to rot. But the horse didn't leave. He stood here for weeks watching the house. People tried to catch him, tried to sell him off. None of them managed. He threw men off like rag dolls, broke fences, kicked down gates, always came back here. She turned her eyes back to Jesse, as if he was waiting for someone, or guarding something no one else could see. The mist thinned, and Shadow's silhouette sharpened against the morning light, head lifted high. Jesse felt that gaze again, piercing through the fog, burning its way into him. Martha followed his eyes and then looked back at him. "You've heard the stories, haven't you?" Jesse nodded once. "People say this land is cursed," she went on. "They say at night the lights burn in the house, though no hand strikes a flame. They hear hooves pounding the yard when there's nothing there to make them. They see shadows move where no man walks." Jesse's jaw tightened. He remembered the ashes still warm in the fireplace, the water in the glass, the Mustang's golden eyes in the lantern light. He knew better than to name it curse. Not ghosts, he thought, though. He didn't say it aloud. Just the horse. Just him. Martha studied him a moment longer. Then her voice changed, steady and edged with warning. "There's someone who wants that horse. Someone who won't stop until he has it." Jesse's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Her lips pressed together. She didn't speak the name, but her silence was answer enough. At last, she said, "A wealthy man, one used to owning everything he lays eyes on. He knows that Black Mustang is no ordinary beast. He wants it for more than pride. A horse like that can be turned into a weapon, a banner of power. And men like him." She shook her head. "They don't give up easy." Jesse's hand closed into a fist against the table. Martha looked at him carefully. The lines in her face deepened, her eyes still sharp. "If you stay here, if you claim this ranch, you'll be standing in his way, and he won't forgive you for that. So you'd better be certain, Jesse Hart." Because Boone, she let the name fall like a stone, isn't a man who leaves what he wants behind. The morning Jesse stepped out with a hammer tucked under one arm, a handful of rusty nails in his pocket, and the old hunting knife he carried everywhere. The barn loomed ahead, weathered and broken, but still upright enough to be worth saving. He studied it a long moment, chewing at the inside of his cheek. "If I want that horse to stay," he muttered, "I'll need to give him more than ruins." Shadow was already there, standing near the gate that sagged inward, his massive body framed against the sky. The stallion watched Jesse as he crossed the yard, head-lifted ears flicking at every movement. Jesse had grown used to that gaze, the weight of it, as if every swing of his arm and every step was being judged. He ignored the prickle on the back of his neck and set to work. He began with the floor, dragging out heaps of moldy straw that disintegrated in his hands, clearing space enough to move. The boards beneath creaked, warped, but still holding. He salvaged what planks he could, stacking them neatly, then propped one beam back into place and tapped nails with steady rhythm. Each strike echoed through the hollow, a sound of labor the ranch hadn't heard in years. Shadow huffed, tossed his mane, but didn't stray far. He shifted his weight as Jesse worked, stamping occasionally, watching like a sentinel. Jesse caught the movement out of the corner of his eye, and a thought settled deep in him. "If I want that horse's trust, I have to earn it here. This barn was his shelter once. I'll make it a shelter again." Hours passed. Sweat cut lines through the dust on Jesse's face. He stripped his coat off, hung it over a rail, and worked bare-armed. When he bent to pull another heap of rotten boards from the corner, his hand paused. Something about the wall at the back caught his attention. The planks there weren't as gray as the others. They hadn't weathered the same way. When his knuckles rapped against them, the sound was hollow, not solid. He straightened slowly, wiping his palms against his trousers, heart beating faster. "Well now," he murmured. "What have you got hiding back there?" Kneeling again, he pressed the tip of his knife into the seam between two boards and pried. Dust trickled down in a fine cloud. The wood resisted at first, then gave with a splintering crack. A wedge of darkness opened behind the wall, the smell of stale wood and faint metal drifting out. Jesse froze a moment, listening to the rush of blood in his ears. The air coming from that cavity was colder, untouched for years. With careful effort, he widened the gap, dragging one plank free, then another, until a small recess yawned in the wall. He reached inside. His fingers touched rough edges, corners. Wood. He pulled, grunting with effort, until a small chest slid into view. It was square, heavy despite its size, bound with iron hinges now orange with rust. Dust coated it, thick years layered into the grain. Jesse set it on the floor lantern light, falling across it. The lock had long since corroded. With one thrust of his knife, the clasp snapped and the lid creaked open. The sound seemed to echo unnaturally in the barn, like the groan of a secret unwilling to be told. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in oilcloth edges stiff with age. Beside it, a sealed envelope tied with twine. Jesse sat back on his heels. His hands were steady, though his heart wasn't. He unfolded the oilcloth first. Sheets of paper crackled as they emerged, the ink faded but still visible. It was a map. The lines were hand-drawn valleys and ridges marked with care rivers traced in wavering brown ink. In the center, scrawled notes labeled the slopes of Silver Ridge. And there, marked by a red X, was a shaft drawn into the mountainside. Beside it, in neat looping letters, was written, "Abandoned 20 years, but the vein still breathes silver." Jesse sucked in a sharp breath. Silver. Enough to build empires, enough to turn men into monsters. He held the paper longer than he meant to, staring at the simple strokes that spelled out ruin or salvation. He knew at once why this ranch had never been left in peace, why whispers clung to it, why men with greed in their eyes would circle back again and again. His fist tightened around the map. "So that's it," he muttered. "Not curses, not ghosts, just silver." But his gaze shifted to the envelope. That too had weight. Twine cut away easily and the paper inside trembled as he opened it. The handwriting was the same, feminine, steady in some lines, faltering in others, as if written with a failing hand. "If you are reading this, it means my time has ended." Jesse's throat tightened. He read on the words clear despite the faded ink. "My lungs are failing me. I cough blood into rags, and I cannot ride far anymore. I know what waits, and I will not last the winter. So I write these words as my testament, though no court may honor them. Shadow is not a beast to be sold. He is not property. He is my friend as close as blood, and he must not fall into greedy hands. If I die, then this ranch and Shadow belong only to the one who comes with no greed in his heart, the one who will guard him, not exploit him. If such a person never comes, then the ranch must be given to the Wildlife Trust to protect the land and keep him free. I know Boone will come. He has always watched. He waits for me to falter so he can claim what he believes is his. But he must not have it. He must never have it." Jesse's eyes moved to the line scrawled more uneven than the rest, as if the writer had been near collapse when she wrote it. "Shadow carries the key. Whoever he chooses will know the path forward." At the bottom, beneath Elena's shaky testament, was a single scrawled line, "Rafael Cruz, Santa Fe." An address followed, faint but legible. Her brother. maybe the only blood left. Jesse sat at the kitchen table, the oil lamp flickering low. His hands rested on the worn wood one, clutching a stub of pencil he'd found in a drawer. He copied the address onto a fresh sheet, pausing more than once, his jaw set tight. "Will he believe me?" he whispered into the silence. "Or think I'm just another man chasing silver?" The thought gnawed at him. He had nothing, no wealth, no proof of his own honesty, except the ragged edges of a life lived without it. He stared at Elena's letter again, the words blurred by fatigue. At last, with a grunt of resolve, he folded a clean sheet, copied a few lines from her hand, and sealed it into an envelope of his own. "Better to try," he muttered, than to sit waiting. The following morning, he saddled himself and walked down into Silver Ridge. The town was waking, slow smoke drifting from chimneys, the hammer of a blacksmith ringing somewhere down the lane. The post office sat on a corner, small and tired, its walls lined with curled maps of the territory, and shelves stacked with bundles of yellowed mail. Inside, the air smelled of ink and dust. Jesse stepped up to the counter, laid the letter flat, and asked for postage to Santa Fe. The clerk, a round man with spectacles perched low, looked him over curiously. "Writing to someone important?" the clerk asked, squinting at the neat script on the envelope. Jesse's mouth pulled thin. "A relative of an old friend." The man grunted, affixed the stamp, and dropped the letter into a battered wooden box marked "Dispatch." The sound it made landing there felt final, like a stone dropped into a well. Jesse nodded his thanks and stepped out the door, shutting behind him with a dry thud. Days passed. Jesse threw himself into work, repairing what beams he could salvage, shoveling debris from the barn, stacking wood for the hearth. Each night when the labor ended, he sat by the fire with Elena's letter spread across his knees. He read it line by line, slower each time, until he could almost hear her voice through the ink. Shadow lingered near. At first, the Mustang kept his distance, hovering at the edge of the corral, watching Jesse with wary eyes. But as days turned into a week, the stallion edged closer. Sometimes, when Jesse hammered nails, Shadow came to stand a few feet away, ears flicking, mane tossing in the breeze, as if testing his patience. Jesse never pushed, never reached out. Trust would grow if it wanted to. The ranch no longer felt cursed. It felt wounded, yes, but slowly, like a cut beginning to knit, it was healing. A week later, the rhythm of hoofbeats drew Jesse's attention as he was stacking planks. He turned to see a rider in a brown coat cresting the rise, carrying a leather satchel. "The postman." "Got one for your heart," the rider called, tossing down an envelope. Jesse caught it, fingers trembling. His eyes caught the return mark, Santa Fe. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, signed Rafael Cruz. He slid it open with his knife and read. The words were crisp, confident. "Yes, I am Elena's brother. I thank you for finding what she left behind. I believe you." She would not have entrusted her words to just anyone. "If you wish to speak further, call the station office at Santa Fe. Ask for Rafael Cruz. I work there most evenings. You'll find me." Jesse folded the letter, slid it into his pocket. Relief mingled with unease. The next step would not be on paper. It would be spoken. He rode down to town the following morning, not to the post office this time, but to the saloon, the only place in Silver Ridge with a telephone wired to the larger world. The air inside reeked of stale beer and smoke. The barkeep, a lean man with a rag slung over his shoulder, eyed him as he stepped up. "Need the phone," Jesse said, placing coins on the counter. The barkeep shrugged, pushed the receiver across. Jesse cranked the handle, dialed the numbers written in Raphael's letter. Each ring echoed in his chest. At last, a voice answered, deep, rough, steady. "Rafael Cruz speaking." Jesse swallowed. "This is Jesse Hart. I found Elena's letter." Silence stretched on the line long enough that Jesse thought the connection might have died. Then came a slow, weary sigh. "My sister Raphael," said, voice low. "She always believed someone would come. She told me once, one day there'll be a man with no greed in him, someone who'll see Shadow for what he is not, what he's worth. Maybe you're him." Jesse shifted the phone heavy in his hand. "I didn't know her, but I found what she hid. And I'm not leaving it for Boone." The name brought a pause. Then Raphael's voice hardened. "Elena wrote to me about a cowboy in Silver Ridge," Raphael said. "Poor as dirt, but with a spine. She said if anything happened to her, the ranch should go to a man like that." She wasn't one to speak lightly. Jesse stared at the floorboards, words caught in his throat. He had never once thought of himself as anyone's choice. Yet here was Elena Cruz, gone to the grave, having named him without ever knowing him. "If you've read her letter," Raphael said firmly, "then she already chose you." Jesse's chest tightened. He whispered half to himself, "Feels more like fate than choice." But Raphael's tone shifted sharp as steel. "Listen to me now. There's a man named Silas Boone. You've heard of him." Jesse's jaw clenched. "The name's been spoken. He owns mines all over the territory," Raphael went on. "He's rich, ruthless, and never satisfied. What he wants now is Black Hollow, not for the land, but for what runs under it." "The silver vein," Jesse said quietly. A silence, then Raphael's grim reply, "Yes. Elena found traces of it. Boone suspects, but he has no proof. If he gets that proof, he'll move heaven and hell to take it. And if you stand in his way, he won't stop at threats. He'll use lawyers' guns, whatever he needs. He'll spill blood." Jesse's hand gripped the receiver until his knuckles whitened. The image of Boone, a man draped in wealth, sitting on a power like a vulture, burned in his mind. "You need to understand," Raphael continued, voice clipped. "Boone doesn't just want the silver. He wants Shadow. That horse is more than flesh. To him, he sees it as a weapon, a prize, a symbol. And men like him never forgive when someone else stands between them and their prize." Jesse breathed out slow. "I don't have money. I don't have guns or men. All I've got is my hands and that horse." On the other end, Raphael gave a low, wry chuckle. "Sometimes that's enough. My sister trusted Shadow more than she trusted men. If he's with you, then you're not as empty-handed as you think." Jesse lowered his head, speaking as if to himself, "I'll keep the promise, no matter what Boone brings." There was a pause, then Raphael's steady voice. "If he pushes, if he sends men, call me again. I'll come north. You won't be alone." The line clicked. The barkeep leaned over, wiping a glass, but Jesse ignored him. He slipped the receiver back into place and stood in silence, the weight of the words still pressing on his shoulders. He returned to the ranch by dusk, the letter and map heavy in his coat pocket. Shadow stood on the slope above the house, his silhouette dark against the reddening sky. The stallion turned his head as Jesse approached, ears twitching, mane stirred by the wind. Jesse pulled the map free, brushed dust from its surface, and folded it again with care. He tucked it deep into his coat, close to his chest. Then he lifted his eyes to the Mustang. "Boone may have his silver," Jesse said softly. "But I've got you. And together, we won't lose." Shadow stamped a hoof, the sound ringing like an answer. The wind carried it across the hollow into the bones of the house, into Jesse's chest, until it became a vow, unspoken. The afternoon sun was sliding down the slope of Silver Ridge, washing the hollow in tired gold. Jesse worked in the yard, hammer in hand, driving a board into place on the half-mended stall. Each strike rang sharp against the silence, echoing off the trees that hemmed the ranch in. Sweat dripped from his temples, soaking into his collar. Shadow stood nearby, ears twitching, as if each blow were a signal he alone could understand. The rhythm broke suddenly. A sound drifted from down the trail, dull at first, then louder. Hooves. 3 sets, steady, deliberate, growing closer with each beat. Jesse lowered his hammer, wiping his brow with the back of his sleeve. His eyes narrowed toward the winding road that cut down the ridge. Shadow's head shot up. The stallion gave a short, sharp snort, muscles tensing, mane bristling. He pawed the earth, restless, his whole body alive with warning. "Easy boy," Jesse murmured, though his own pulse had quickened. Through the dust of the trail, figures emerged, 3 riders climbing the slope, with the confidence of men who never doubted where they belonged. The leader's mount gleamed white, tall and muscular, its mane braided with care. Sunlight caught on polished tack, throwing sparks as bright as coin. Jesse let out a long breath. Whoever this was, they hadn't come for neighborly chat. The lead rider was a man past 50, broad-shouldered, though his waist had thickened with the years. He sat tall in the saddle, his presence filling the space before his words ever reached it. His coat was cut from a dark, expensive leather, the lapels lined with silver stitching that caught the light. A black hat rimmed in silver rested above a face carved by years of sun and power. His mustache was full-trimmed sharp, and his eyes cold gray. Assured swept the yard with practiced ownership. Silas Boone. Jesse had never met him, but he didn't need an introduction. Men like Boone carried their names ahead of them, whispered by every mouth in the territory. Boone reined his horse to a stop, lips curling into a smirk. So he said, voice rough, carrying in the quiet air, "You're the drifter who bought Black Hollow for 3 measly pennies." The words hung like an insult, sharpened by amusement. Boone nudged his horse forward, circling the yard with the patience of a predator. His eyes flicked over the patched boards of the barn, the sagging roof of the house, the faint smoke still curling from Jesse's chimney. He took in every detail, filing it away, measuring, judging. "This place," Boone said at last, his tone steady but edged with scorn, "doesn't suit you. Too much land for one pair of poor hands. Too much history for a man with no roots." His gaze slid to the black stallion standing near the fence. Shadow had stilled ears, flat nostrils flaring. Boone's eyes gleamed. "And that horse," he added, voice lowering, "is far too wild for the likes of you." Jesse said nothing. He crossed his arms over his chest, feet planted firm, and let the silence do the speaking. Boone stopped his circling. He leaned down from the saddle, his presence looming. "Let's not dance around it. Sell me the ranch. Sell me that beast. I'll pay you 1,000 times what you wasted on it. Enough for a house in town, whiskey every night, food you don't have to tear with your teeth. All you need do is sign." Behind him, the 2 riders chuckled, smug, already tasting the deal. Their laughter cut against the quiet, oily with certainty. Jesse bent, picked up the hammer he'd set aside. He drove it point first into the dirt with a solid thunk. Straightening, he met Boone's stare head on. Not for sale. For the first time, Boone's smile faltered. He barked a laugh to cover it, leaning back in his saddle. "Do you know why no one stays here, boy? Because this land's cursed. Every fool who's tried has ended up in the ground before their time. Your name will be the next one whispered in Silver Ridge, marked by the same bad omen. Walk away now, and I'll save you that fate." Jesse's jaw tightened. "I don't believe in curses," he said. His voice was flat, steady as the ground beneath his boots. "What I believe in is greed. And I see plenty of that staring back at me." The words hit sharper than a bullet. Boone's hand tightened on the reins. His eyes, once mocking, sharpened to a narrow flame. "You think you've got what it takes to hold this place against me?" Jesse took a step forward. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of stone. "There are some things you can't buy with silver or gold." The air thickened heavy as a storm about to break. Then Shadow screamed, a piercing, wild cry that split the hollow. He pounded the earth with his hooves, dust flying, eyes blazing gold as fire. He moved forward, not retreating, not shying, but stepping squarely between Jesse and Boone's horse, his body a wall of muscle and defiance. For a heartbeat, Boone's mask cracked. He flinched just slightly at the sight of the stallion standing guard. Then his smirk returned brittle but in place. Boone's tone shifted low and cutting. "A horse may choose its master with a glance, but a glance won't feed your belly or keep you warm in winter." He jerked his chin at his men. "Remember that face? He'll regret this before long." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a growl only Jesse could hear. "You're not just holding a horse. You're holding the silver vein my men couldn't prove. Elena hit it, but I'll take it back. One way or another." Jesse's stomach clenched. So Boone knew. He'd known all along. Boone straightened, yanked the reins. His white stallion reared slightly before plunging down the trail. Dust rose in thick clouds, coating the air. His men lingered just long enough to sneer at Jesse, then followed their horses, thundering after their master. The hollow grew silent again, save for the wind through the pines. Shadow pawed the ground once, then stilled his chest, heaving with fierce breath. Jesse stood, rooted fists clenched at his sides, heart pounding like war drums. "They know," he whispered to himself. And the fight's begun. Dawn spilled weakly over the roofs of Silver Ridge, touching the brick fronts and weathered boardwalks with a pale glow. Jesse rode down the main street on Shadow, the stallion's hooves striking sharp against the dirt-packed road. The townsfolk turned to look. Some gave cautious nods, others only stared. A black Mustang was a rare sight within town limits, and one ridden by a drifter who had bought a cursed ranch for 3 pennies, rarer still. Jesse ignored the whispers guiding Shadow toward a brick building tucked between a shuttered tailor's shop and the barber's. Its windows bore a single wooden sign, carved but faded by decades of sun and snow, Ethan Graves. Attorney at law. The letters were worn but still legible, a testament to patience and endurance. He swung down tied Shadow to the post out front and climbed the wooden steps. The door creaked open beneath his hand, releasing the smell of dust, ink, and old paper. The office was plain. Shelves sagged beneath stacks of leather-bound books, their spines cracked from long use. On one wall hung a faded pair of saddlebags and a rusted revolver, relics of another life. Behind the desk sat a tall, lean man in his early 40s, hair dark but streaked with silver at the temples. His eyes were deep, set, shadowed with the kind of weariness that comes from too many disappointments. Ethan Graves looked up, squinting at Jesse, as if measuring him in one glance. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "Well now," Ethan said, his voice rough with long nights and coffee, "a broke cowboy walks into a lawyer's office. That's not something you see every day." Jesse removed his hat, nodded once. "Name's Hart, Jesse Hart." Ethan gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Sit then. Tell me why you're here." Jesse lowered himself onto the chair, its legs creaking under his weight. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, and spoke in measured tones. He told of buying Black Hollow Ranch for 3 cents, of walking into the barn and finding the black stallion that refused to leave. He spoke of the hidden chest behind the boards, the map to the abandoned silver vein, the letter Elena Cruz had left with her dying hand. His voice hardened when he reached the part about Boone, the rich man on the white horse, who had come to demand what wasn't his. Ethan didn't interrupt. He sat back, one long finger tapping lightly against the wood of his desk, eyes never leaving Jesse's face. When Jesse finally pulled the folded letter from his coat and laid it on the desk, Ethan slid his spectacles on, unfolded the paper, and began to read. The silence stretched. Jesse could hear only the faint ticking of a clock on the wall and the muted clatter of wagons in the street outside. At last, Ethan leaned back, removing his glasses. His expression had sharpened into something more focused, more certain. This, he said, tapping the letter with one finger, is evidence. Elena's will, even if not formal, shows her intent clear as daylight. She meant for the ranch and that horse to stay with someone she trusted, not to be sold off to men like Boone. Add in that map and the chest, and you've got enough to open a case in court. Jesse frowned. Boone's got money. He's got lawyers on his payroll. Do you really think justice is going to favor a man with 3 pennies to his name? Ethan let out a dry laugh, bitter, but not without humor. I used to think the law had no place for men like us. But the truth is, law can cut both ways. It can be bent, twisted, bought. But in the right hands, it can be a blade. And I've learned how to hold it. He stood, moved to the wall, and laid a hand against the old saddle hanging there. His voice dropped into memory. I wasn't always a lawyer. Once I rode with the best of them, guns, whiskey, and pride. Thought I was bulletproof. Then I lost one fight too many. Lost friends. Lost myself. Had to start again, so I traded the saddle for the courtroom. He turned, eyes locking with Jesse's. Men like Boone think only money matters. But I know how to use paper and words against them the way we once used pistols. And Boone, he won't see it coming. Jesse sat straighter, the flicker of hope sharp in his chest. Ethan came back to the desk, leaning forward on his hands. But make no mistake, he said, his tone low, serious. This won't be easy. Boone will fight with every coin he's got. He'll drag in lawyers slicker than rattlesnakes, sway judges, even hire men with guns if he has to. Once you step into this battle, every word, every scrap of paper, every witness you bring will matter. Jesse met his gaze squarely. If that's the way to protect Shadow and the ranch, then I'll stand. A faint smile creased Ethan's tired features. Good. Then we fight. He began laying out a plan, his voice brisk, now sharpened with purpose. First, guard that chest and letter. Keep them safe. Those are your strongest pieces of evidence. Second, we'll need testimony. Elena's brother Raphael, get him ready to stand as kin. And Martha Doyle, she can confirm the bond between Elena and that horse. Those two will be vital. Jesse nodded. They'll stand with me. Good, Ethan said. Once we've gathered all that, we'll file with the La Plata County Court. Boone will be dragged into daylight, and there he won't be able to hide behind his wealth. Jesse rose from the chair, reaching across the desk. Ethan grasped his hand firmly, the shake strong, unflinching. For the first time, Jesse said quietly, I don't feel like I'm fighting alone. When Jesse stepped back out onto the street, the morning had brightened. He tucked the documents back into his coat pocket, the weight of Elena's words heavy, but no longer suffocating. On the boardwalk, townsfolk still watched him with suspicion, whispering about curses and fools clinging to rotten land. But Jesse swung into the saddle, Shadow, shifting beneath him with restless energy. He glanced once over his shoulder at the weathered sign above the office door, Ethan Graves, attorney at law. The letters seemed steadier than they had before. Boone might still have his money, his lawyers, his riders, but Jesse now had something he had not possessed in years, an ally. As Shadow carried him back up the road toward Black Hollow, Jesse's jaw tightened. The fight had only begun, but for the first time, he believed he might just have a chance to win. The courthouse of Silver Ridge stood in the middle of town, a relic of another century. Its clapboard walls were peeling, the roof sagged in places, and the flag outside hung faded, its colors bled by sun and rain. Yet inside those worn walls, justice still had teeth. On this day, the benches creaked beneath the weight of half the town, drawn by curiosity, suspicion, and the irresistible pull of a fight between the richest man in the territory and a drifter who had bought a cursed ranch for 3 pennies. The air was thick, heavy with dust and expectation. The long wooden pews were packed with farmers, miners, shopkeepers, their voices hushed, though every eye gleamed with hunger for spectacle. The floorboards groaned as boots shuffled, and the scent of sweat and tobacco clung to the rafters. At the front of the chamber, the judge's bench loomed high, flanked by the tattered flag of the United States and the county seal burned into wood. The gavel lay ready, polished from decades of use, a symbol that law, at least here, was not yet wholly bought or sold. Abigail Stone, presiding judge, was already seated. She was a woman in her early 60s, her hair pulled tight in a bun, streaked with silver, her eyes clear and unflinching. In Silver Ridge, she was known for 2 things: fairness sharper than a blade and no patience for theatrics. Her presence alone silenced the murmur of the crowd. To her left, Ethan Graves sat at the petitioner's table. Thin, angular shoulders a little stooped, he looked more scholar than fighter. Yet his eyes were sharp, and his hands rested on a binder of notes thick enough to anchor a ship. Jesse sat beside him, hat in his lap, back straight, jaw set. The black coat he wore was plain, his boots scuffed, but there was steel in his bearing, a quiet dignity no money could buy. On the other side of the aisle lounged Silas Boone, his girth wrapped in a vest of imported wool boots, polished to a shine. He exuded confidence, sitting as if the verdict were already written in his favor. Beside him was Clive Mercer, a man of 50 with slicked back hair and eyes like glass beads. His voice, when it came, was smooth and slippery, the kind that made lies sound like truth. Behind them, townsfolk whispered. In the front row, Martha Doyle sat, her hands folded primly in her lap, her thin frame wrapped in a shawl. Beside her was Raphael Cruz, road-dusted and solid, his expression carved in grief and determination. Both knew why they were here, and both knew their words might decide the fate of a ranch and a horse, and perhaps more. The gavel struck once. "This court is now in session," Judge Stone declared, her voice ringing through the hall. "We convene on the matter of Black Hollow Ranch, its ownership, and the guardianship of the animal known as Shadow. All statements will be recorded. Any disruption will see the offender removed." The room stilled. Boone's mouth twitched with a smirk. Jesse inhaled slowly, steadying his breath. "Mr. Mercer, Judge Stone said your opening." Mercer rose, smoothing his lapels, and approached the lectern with the casual confidence of a man who had walked this path many times. "Your Honor," he began, his voice dripping with polish. "This case is simple. My client, Mr. Silas Boone, lawfully acquired Black Hollow Ranch through legal transfer after the passing of Miss Elena Cruz. The land, by all appearances, was abandoned. Miss Cruz left no recognized heir, and so the property was under law, subject to claim. Mr. Boone, being a man of means and responsibility, ensured it did not fall to ruin. He opened a leather folder, produced papers stamped and signed, and held them aloft. Here is the deed bearing Cruz's mark. The ink may be faint, but the record stands. My client invested, maintained, and preserved the land when no one else would." He paused, eyes glinting toward Jesse. "Now we see before us a drifter one heart who stumbled upon the place and fancies himself its rightful owner because he paid 3 pennies to some half-asleep clerk. A laughable sum, a laughable claim. Ranches are not toys for paupers. They are meant for men who can keep them alive. Boone leaned back in his chair, lips curling as Mercer delivered the final barb. This case, Your Honor, is not about sentiment or superstition. It is about rightful ownership, and that belongs to Silas Boone, Mr. Graves, Judge Stone said. Ethan rose, his long frame unfolding with deliberate calm. He carried no silk folder, no polished smile, only a stack of well-worn documents and the letter Jesse had guarded with his life. Your Honor, he began, his voice quiet, but carrying this case is not about ownership by force. It is about intent. Miss Elena Cruz left behind words not hidden or vague, but plain, that her ranch and the horse she raised from foalhood were to belong to a protector, someone who would care for them, not exploit them. He laid the letter gently on the clerk's desk, then the hand-drawn map. Here are her own words. Her hand not forged, her thoughts not bought. She entrusted that horse, that land, to someone who would honor her will, not to the deepest pocket in the room. Ethan's eyes flicked briefly to Boone, then back to the judge. Silas Boone cannot even keep his greed in check long enough to hide it. My client, Jesse Hart, has already done what Elena asked. He kept the horse alive. He restored the land piece by piece. If there is any justice in this court, it is that Elena's words be respected and Jesse Hart be recognized as the rightful guardian. The judge nodded, expression unreadable. Call your witnesses. Ethan gestured. Martha Doyle rose slowly, her shawl clutched around her shoulders. She walked to the stand, her steps small but steady. When sworn in, she lifted her chin, her eyes clear. I knew Elena Cruz, Martha began, her voice thin but firm. I watched her raise that black colt when it was little more than bones. She fed it from her own hands, taught it to trust. After she passed, I watched the ranch fall silent. The horse stayed. He wouldn't leave. Boone sent his men more than once. That horse fought them, broke their ropes, sent them running. I know because I saw it. And when no one else cared, I left food at the gate. Without me, he would have starved. Mercer stepped forward. Mrs. Doyle, with respect, you're repeating stories. Shadows and gossip don't hold weight in court. Where is your proof? Martha turned her lined face toward him, voice steady as iron. My proof is that the horse is alive. Ask Boone's men if they ever caught him. Ask anyone in town who saw him standing guard at that ranch. Rumors don't feed a living creature. I did. A ripple of agreement stirred in the benches. Next came Rafael Cruz. Taller than Martha, with the weight of miles in his eyes, he carried papers of his own birth records, family proof. I am Elena's brother, he said simply. This is her bloodline and mine. She wrote to me before she died, though I did not arrive in time. In her letter, she said plainly, if she passed, the ranch must not fall to Boone. She said the land should go to a man in Silver Ridge who had nothing but an honest heart. She must have meant Jesse Hart. He fits the words better than any I've known. Mercer rose again, sneering. So you claim you want justice, but what you really want is a share of the mine, isn't that it? The silver beneath the ridge. Raphael's eyes burned as he faced him. I don't want silver. I don't want land. I want what my sister asked for, and that is not Boone. Finally, Ethan called Jesse. The cowboy rose, his boots heavy against the boards as he approached the witness stand. He took the oath, then stood there, hands clasped loosely before him. His voice was quiet, almost rough, but every word struck clean. I found Shadow in the dark of that barn. He didn't run from me. He stood there waiting. I've seen eyes like his before in the faces of children, and war eyes that say, "Don't leave me." He swallowed, glanced at the floor, then back to the judge. I don't have money. I don't have power. But I have enough to keep what Elena left safe. I think that's all she ever wanted. room stilled. Even Boone, for the briefest second, shifted in his chair, his smirk faltering before returning. Mercer sprang up, slamming a hand against the table. "So we entrust land and livestock to a pauper's promise. What can this man build with empty hands? He paid 3 cents, 3. The whole affair is a joke. The horse is not property. It is a wild beast, and wild beasts belong to no man." Ethan rose smoothly, his voice cutting. "You're wrong. Shadow is not wild. He was raised, cared for, loved. The law recognizes bonds like these just as it does the bonds of family. Elena Cruz's will is plain, and intent, Mr. Mercer, carries weight even in this court." "Enough," Judge Stone said sharply, her gavel striking once. "Order." The room breathed in silence. Dust swirled in the shafts of light from the windows, carried on a low hiss of wind. The onlookers shifted, their whispers now heavier, more sympathetic. Jesse felt the eyes of the town upon him, not mocking now, but weighing, considering. Boone sat stone-faced, one finger tapping a steady rhythm against the arm of his chair. His mask was cracking. Jesse could see it. The trial was far from over, but the balance of the room had shifted. Judge Abigail Stone, her voice carrying with the force of iron. Having reviewed the evidence, the testimony of witnesses, and the documents presented, she said every syllable measured. This court finds the papers submitted by Mr. Boone invalid. Their marks bear no legal weight and were obtained under questionable circumstances. She paused, and the crowd shifted, waiting for the hammer of her judgment to fall. By contrast, she continued, lifting the letter and the map. With deliberate care, the testament of Miss Elena Cruz is clear. Her will, though imperfect in form, leaves no doubt of her intent. Black Hollow Ranch and the guardianship of the Mustang known as Shadow are hereby granted to Jesse Hart. A ripple ran through the benches. Some gasped, others whispered, but the poor folks smiled, quiet, relieved smiles, as though justice had taken their side for once. The richer faces, soured lips, pressed thin. At the petitioner's table, Jesse's fingers curled tight on the edge of the bench. His throat was thick, his eyes burning, but he gave no cry of triumph. He only bowed his head once in silent acknowledgement, his jaw clenched to keep emotion in check. The ranch was his. Shadow was his. Elena's will had been honored. The verdict had barely settled when Boone exploded to his feet. His face had flushed red, his hands trembling with rage. "This is an outrage," he bellowed, voice cracking the silence. "A damn farce. That ragged drifter paid 3 cents, 3 cents, and you give him a ranch, a mine." Mercer tugged at his sleeve, hissing for him to sit, but Boone shook him off. He jabbed a thick finger at Jesse. "I'll take it back. You hear me, Hart? This isn't over. Not by a long shot." Judge Stone slammed her gavel again, sharp as a gunshot. "Mr. Boone, another word of threat in my court, and you'll answer to the sheriff. Do you understand me?" For a moment, Boone's fury flared so bright, it seemed he might burst. Then his mouth twisted into a cold, joyless smile. He gave a mocking bow toward the bench and stalked from the room, his boots pounding like drum beats. As he passed Jesse, his eyes cut like a knife, promising retribution in silence. Outside the courthouse, the town was already buzzing. Word spread down the street before Jesse had even stepped onto the boardwalk. Boone lost. They gave it to the drifter. 3 pennies beat a fortune. Farmers and shopkeepers smiled, tipping hats to Jesse as he passed. To them, it was more than one man's victory. It was proof that the law could still be fair. The rich and proud, however, turned away with stiff spines and bitter muttering. On the steps, Martha Doyle clutched Jesse's arm, her voice low. "He won't forgive this. Mark me, boy, Boone will come back with guns." Jesse met her gaze, weary but steady. Then let him. I'll be waiting." That night, Boone drank in the back of a dim saloon, the room thick with cigar smoke and resentment. His white vest was rumpled, his hat thrown carelessly on the bar. Around him sat 3 hard-eyed men, the kind who lived by their trigger fingers. Their guns lay close at hand, their silence, the silence of men who didn't need words to understand their trade. Boone poured whiskey into his glass until it overflowed, then slammed the bottle down. His voice was low, but carried the venom of a rattler. "Tomorrow night," he said, "we ride up to Black Hollow. We take it by fire if we must. Heart won't last an hour against steel." The men nodded, one cocking his revolver with a click that cut through the haze. The plan was set. Boone would not lose twice. But word traveled fast in Silver Ridge, faster than Boone reckoned. Raphael Cruz heard whispers from the depot before the ink was dry on Boone's bottle. By dusk, a rider carried a note to Jesse's gate. The warning was clear: Boone is coming. Back at the ranch, Jesse read the message under the flickering light of a kerosene lamp. He folded it carefully, his jaw tightening. He had expected as much. He spent the next hours shoring up what little he could, the fences nailed firm and the door barred, the rifle he'd found rusting in the attic cleaned and loaded. It wasn't much, but it was something. Ethan Graves rode out just before dark. He brought no weapon, only his grave expression. "Jesse," he said, "if Boone comes, let him make the first move. Witnesses matter. The law will not save you tonight, but it will tomorrow." "Understand," Jesse nodded. "I won't fire unless I have to." Martha came later carrying a basket with bread and stew. She placed it on the table without a word, her eyes glistening with the weight of unspoken fears. "The poor folk of town are praying for you," she whispered. "You stand for more than yourself now." When they had gone, Jesse stood alone in the yard. Shadow grazing near the barn. The stallion lifted his head, his eyes burning in the starlight. "Tomorrow night," Jesse murmured, "this ends. One way or another." The moon was high when the sound came. Hooves on stone, steady and growing louder. Jesse stood on the porch, rifle in hand, his breath calm but slow. Shadow stirred in the paddock muscles, coiling ears pricked. The riders came into view, 4 of them. Boone at the front on his gleaming white horse. His coat flared in the moonlight, his face twisted with triumph long before the fight began. "Come out, Hart," Boone's voice carried across the hollow. "This land was mine before your filthy hands touched it. Tonight I take it back." Jesse stepped down from the porch, rifle loose at his side. "You had your chance in court. You lost. No coin can change that." Boone's lip curled. "Then coin will buy bullets." He raised his arm. "Kill him." Before the first shot rang, a scream split the night. Not human, but wild and fierce. Shadow thundered out of the darkness, like a storm given flesh. His hooves tore at the ground, his mane streaming like a banner. He hit Boone's line like a cannonball. One gunman yelped, thrown from his saddle as Shadow's shoulders slammed into his mount. The man tumbled into the dust, his revolver skittering away. Another tried to fire, but Shadow's kick caught his horse broadside, sending beast and rider sprawling in chaos. Boone cursed, jerking his white stallion back, as Shadow wheeled, eyes blazing, breath steaming in the cold air. The Mustang planted himself squarely between Jesse and the intruders, head-high chest, heaving a wall of black fire. Moonlight caught his eyes, turning them to molten gold. Jesse raised his rifle not to shoot, but to make his stand. His voice was steady, ringing clear. "This land isn't yours, Boone. Leave now, or Shadow will finish what you started." Boone's hand twitched toward his gun, rage twisting his face. He yanked the revolver free. But before he could aim, Shadow screamed again. rising high, his forehoofs striking the air. They crashed down inches from Boone's horse, the impact shaking the ground. The white stallion shrieked, panicked, reared. Boone fought the reins, cursing, but the horse spun and bolted. Boone clung desperately, his hat flying into the dust, his curses trailing behind as he fled into the trees. The last two gunmen, shaken and wide-eyed, broke and ran, spurring their mounts after him. Within moments, the sound of hooves faded into the distance, leaving only silence and the heavy breathing of the black stallion. Shadow stood still, head-high, mane plastered with sweat. Slowly he turned to Jesse, as if asking whether the danger had truly passed. Jesse lowered the rifle. "It's done," he whispered. We held. By dawn, the town knew. Boone had been driven from Black Hollow, not by Jesse's rifle, but by the fury of the black Mustang. At the saloon, miners laughed into their mugs. At the market, women whispered the rich man was chased out by a drifter and his horse. Boys ran through the streets shouting "Shadow, Shadow" until the name echoed like legend. Boone's power cracked. Business partners began to back away, unwilling to stake fortunes on a man who had lost to 3 pennies and a black horse. His miners grumbled respect, withering into ridicule. And Black Hollow Ranch, once called Curacao, was no longer spoken of with fear. It was spoken of with awe. The air itself seemed lighter, as if the hollow had exhaled the poison it had held for years. But Jesse knew that victory was only a beginning. Black Hollow was still broken, its bones sagging under years of neglect. If it was to live again, it would need more than a verdict and a Mustang's defiance. It would need sweat grit and stubborn faith. So Jesse rose with the sun and put his hands to work. The first task was the roof. He climbed onto the house with hammer and nails scavenged from town, prying away the rotted planks that sagged like old scars. Each swing of the hammer cracked the silence echoing down the ridge. The board splintered, dust rising in clouds, but Jesse kept at it. Every nail he muttered, driving one home as a stake, saying this place belongs to me now. Shadow stood near the barn, head-high, ears twitching at each blow. Sometimes he'd whicker softly, as if in encouragement, the sound rolling through the quiet like a reminder Jesse was not alone. Sweat streaked Jesse's back. His shoulders ached. But with every board replaced, the house seemed to lift itself straighter, shaking free the weight of abandonment. Black Hollow was no longer a corpse. It was breathing again. Next came the fences. They had collapsed into tangles of gray wood gaps, wide enough for cattle or thieves to walk through without pause. Jesse hauled fresh logs up from the base of the hill, set his shovel deep into the stubborn earth, and dug holes until his hands blistered. Blood slicked the handle, the rope burned his shoulders raw. But one by one the posts stood upright, a line marking the boundary of a home reclaimed. The sight of that fence rising gave Jesse something he hadn't felt in years: permanence. Not just borrowed shelter, not just a night's roof, but land that was his to defend. Shadow followed his progress step by step, pacing along the line. He'd stop at each new post, snorting as though approving, then move on to the next. By the time Jesse drove the final rail into place, the Mustang reared briefly, hooves flashing in the sun, a sentinel announcing to the mountains that the hollow had a master once more. Water was life, and Black Hollow had been thirsty for too long. Jesse had noticed a narrow stream curling through the trees to the east, its waters clear, cold, and endless. With pick and spade, he cut a trench, guiding the flow toward the dead grass of the pasture. It was slow work, stone and root fighting him at every turn. But at last he stood ankle-deep in the cool trickle as it spread across the hollow. The soil darkened, drinking greedily. Within days, the brittle brown blades began to soften, pushing up shoots of green like shy hope returning. Jesse splashed water over his face, the chill biting his skin, and for the first time since he had stepped into the ranch, he laughed a raw, surprised sound. Shadow lowered his head beside him, lapping at the stream droplets clinging to his muzzle and glinting like silver in the fading sun. Jesse reached out, running a hand along the stallion's neck. "This is yours as much as mine," he said softly. The Mustang did not roam anymore. Once Jesse had expected Shadow to vanish back into the wilderness with the first chance. But now each morning, when Jesse opened the door, the horse was already waiting breath, steaming in the chill dawn. He followed Jesse as he worked, never close enough to tether, never far enough to doubt. At dusk, when Jesse sat on the porch watching the last light fade, Shadow would settle in the paddock, his ears flicking toward every sound. If Jesse rose in the night, the stallion's low nicker followed him. A partnership had been born, not forced by reins, but chosen in silence. For the first time in his life, Jesse Hart had something more than passing company. He had a friend, one who asked nothing but presence. The town of Silver Ridge began to notice. At first, it was just whispers, smoke rising steady from the chimney of the house that had long stood empty grass greening where only weeds had grown. Soon, people rode out to see for themselves. Martha Doyle came with another basket, standing at the gate with a smile that softened the hard lines of her face. "I never thought I'd see Black Hollow with life in it again," she said, watching Shadow graze in the new pasture. Word spread down the main street. "That ranch isn't cursed," one man muttered in the saloon. "It just needed the right hands." Even those who once laughed at Jesse's 3-cent purchase found themselves quieting their mockery. Some tipped their hats when he rode into town, now nodding with the cautious respect given to a man who had earned his ground. One morning, Jesse filled his hands with wildflowers gathered from the hills, small blossoms, fragile but stubborn in their growth. He saddled Shadow, and together they rode the winding trail to the little graveyard beneath an ancient oak. Elena Cruz lay there, her stone weathered the words, "Nearly lost, Elena Cruz, keeper of the horse." Jesse knelt, laying the flowers at the base. His voice was low but steady. "I kept my word. Shadow isn't alone anymore. Neither is this ranch. I'll take care of both as you asked." Behind him, Shadow stood motionless. The stallion lowered his great head until his muzzle nearly brushed the stone, a gesture of solemnity that needed no words. From the saddlebag, Jesse pulled out a young red cedar wrapped in cloth. With his knife, he dug a hollow beside the grave, lowering the sapling into the earth. His palms pressed soil around the roots, sweat and dirt mingling as he tamped it firm. "When this tree grows tall," he murmured, "it'll shade your grave, like you shade this land still." The wind moved through the branches of the oak, rattling the fresh leaves of the cedar. To Jesse, it sounded like a scent, as if Elena herself whispered through the hollow, "Thank you." From that day on, the red cedar stood as a vow, a promise rooted deep that Black Hollow would never again fall into neglect. Seasons began to turn, and with them the ranch. Smoke curled from the chimneys each evening. Birds nested along the fence posts, their wings darting over the pasture. Jesse patched the smaller barn hammer, echoing while dreams of horses and cattle to come formed quietly in his mind. Shadow remained the heart of it all. He raced the length of the green field muscles, gleaming mane streaming in the wind. Yet always after the gallop, he circled back, standing close enough that Jesse could reach out and touch him. One night, Jesse sat on the step of the porch, staring at the wide sky. He reached up to rest his palm against Shadow's neck, feeling the warmth of life under his fingers. A smile crept across his face, rare and unguarded. "You're my family now, Shadow," he whispered. "The first I've had in a long, long time." The Mustang blew a soft breath, leaning just enough into the touch to make the words true. What mattered about Black Hollow was no longer the mine or the whispers of treasure. Jesse came to understand that with every board, he replaced every furrow of earth he turned. The ranch was not wealth, it was choice. It was defiance against greed. It was faith that some things were worth keeping alive, even when the world said they were doomed. The people of Silver Ridge saw it too. Where once they sneered at the poor drifter, they now spoke of him with nods of respect. Children ran along the fence calling Mr. Jesse, "That black horse is the finest we've ever seen." Jesse tipped his hat, not with pride, but with quiet satisfaction. He no longer felt outside the town's life. He was part of it, whether he asked for it or not. The sun fell behind the ridge, painting the sky with fire red, violet gold. Jesse sat on the porch, the wood solid beneath him. Shadow beside him, the stallion's heavy head resting against his shoulder. Beyond the pasture, the cedar sapling swayed in the evening breeze, guarding Elena's resting place. Jesse let out a long breath, his voice rough with contentment. "They called this land cursed," he said softly. "But all it ever needed was someone willing to stay." He rubbed the thick muscle of Shadow's neck. "Now I've got a home and a family." The wind carried his words across the hollow. Shadow lifted his head, gave a deep rolling whinny that echoed through the valley, bold and defiant, as if announcing to the mountains themselves that Black Hollow was alive. The ranch had been reborn.